Hello, and welcome to the screencast for the muscle system in 16.3, and we'll also look at the skin or the integumentary system in 16.4. So for the muscular system, let's take a look at the objectives. We're going to identify the three types of human muscle tissue. We're going to look at the structure of skeletal muscles and explain how they move, and explain how muscles contract according to the sliding filament theory. So let's get started. So one of the things that the introduction points out is that we have muscles that we can control, like this young man is doing right now, lifting that weight. But we also have muscles in us which we don't control. For example, the heart and the stomach. We never think about our heart beating. It just beats all the time, and it does that through muscle action, muscle contraction. So it's important, you'll see, where we contrast those that we can control and those that we can't. So there are three types of muscle tissue. In this artist's rendering, we have skeletal tissue, we have smooth muscle tissue, we also have cardiac muscle tissue. So the skeletal tissue is the one that we control. Smooth and cardiac we don't control for the most part. So make sure that you understand there are three types of muscle tissue. Here are some of the major muscle groups. Let's take a look at the arm on the right. We've got the biceps, we've got the pronator, we have all these different muscles. Now, unlike the skeleton, you don't have to have these memorized. I just want you to know, read through them, take a look at them, and know the major muscle groups. Let's take a look at this. The skeletal muscle structure, a skeletal muscle maintains bundles of muscle fibers inside a coat of connective tissue. So in this case, here we have a tendon which is connecting the muscle to the bone. That's important to know what a tendon does. A tendon connects the bone to the muscle, and inside this muscle, because it's a skeletal muscle, there are bundles of fibers. Here's probably one of the most famous pairs of muscles. Many times muscles are paired with one another. In the upper arm, we have the bicep and the tricep. And when your arm is outstretched like this, your tricep is contracted, your bicep is relaxed. But when you pull your arm up, it's the bicep that contracts and the tricep which relaxes. Remember that muscles can only do one thing when they cause movement, and that's to contract. Here we have a young woman who is exercising, and it says human exercise pits muscles against what force? Well, we know that that force is gravity. We are always working against gravity, the gravity of our earth when we work out. It might seem a little weird, but we don't know every little step of how muscles work. We know they contract, and the ongoing theory of how they contract is called the sliding filament theory. Notice that the first sentence says the most widely accepted theory explaining how muscle fibers contract is called just that, the sliding filament theory. According to this theory, myosin filaments, that's what's pictured here in this illustration, use energy from ATP to walk, to move along the actin filaments at their cross bridges. And they think this is how all muscles contract. But as I said, we know, and we can see this with a microscope, but we don't know on the molecular level exactly every little step of what's going on. Let's take a look at the next slide. So in our lesson summary, make sure that you know that there are three types of muscle tissue: smooth, internal organs, skeletal muscles, all the ones that we use to move, and cardiac, only in your heart. Skeletal muscles are attached to the skeletons, and they cause the bones to move when they contract. Notice they don't say expand here, just whenever they contract. And how do muscles move? It's the sliding filament theory. There are two really excellent animations that I want you to watch, and they will be linked at the end of this screencast. They'll also be linked in the presentation itself. But this is from TED Ed, and it's called How Your Muscular System Works by Emma Bryce. You can also just Google that. If you put TED Ed, How Your Muscular System Works, this will come up. And this is wonderful, and it talks about skeletal muscles, cardiac muscles, and smooth muscles, and how the muscles work. This one is how to make your muscles grow. And I think you might be a little bit surprised on what you have to do to muscles to actually make them grow. Okay, let's take a look at the integumentary system, which is our skin. So we'd like to describe skin and its functions and identify some common skin problems, outline the structure and function of hair and nails. The skin's the body's largest organ, and as your text says, it's really incredibly remarkable. Consider this: one square 6.5 centimeter square area, or a square inch, has over 20 blood vessels, 650 sweat glands, and more than 1,000 nerve endings. It has an incredible 60,000 pigment-producing cells, and all of these are packed into a bunch of cells that are just 2 millimeters thick as the cover of a book. It's a good video here that you can watch, but it's just amazing. Keep in mind that the skin is thin. It consists of two very distinct layers, one called the epidermis and one called the dermis. And we'll see them a little bit in a second. Right now, let's take a look at this. You won't have to memorize all these things, but know what's happening here. Okay, for example, here is a hair shaft coming out from this cell down here. Notice we have an artery and a vein coming in to supply oxygen and take away waste product from all of those cells. We have a sweat gland down here. This part's the dermis. Up here's the epidermis. It's just an amazingly complex structure. The dermis is the lower layer of skin. It's located directly beneath the epidermis, and it's made of tough connective tissue attached to the epidermis by collagen fibers. The dermis contains the blood vessels. That's what we just pointed out in the last one. But it also has hair follicles, sebaceous glands, which is an oily substance called sebum, and also the sweat glands that produce a salty fluid called sweat. So make sure you know what's in the dermis and the structure of the dermis and what those various structures do. The skin has multiple roles in the body, and many of these are related to homeostasis. The skin maintains our body temperature by regulating the amount of water. It also controls the amount of light that our skin gets and protects us from damaging UV light. One of the things that we have to be careful about is cancer, skin cancer. We get a lot more UV light than we used to because of the protective layer being a little bit thinner. So if you notice anything on your skin, they call this the ABCDs of skin cancer. Asymmetry means it doesn't look perfectly round. Border irregularity. Also, its color, a little bit darker there. It's not a blood cut healing. And the diameter, if it's greater than 6 millimeters in diameter or greater than about a 1/4 inch, you should pay attention to that and have a dermatologist look at it. So make sure that you know that the skin consists of two layers, epidermis and dermis. It protects us from injury, water loss, microorganisms. Nails and hair mostly contain keratin. So make sure you read the sections 16.3 and 16.4 carefully and be ready for the quiz. Good luck, and we'll see you in the next screencast.